Hi, my name is David Neagle. I'm the author of The Millions Within. I'm the owner and founder of Life Is Now Incorporated. Our podcast is the Successful Mind Podcast. And in the Business Growth Architect podcast, we're going to talk about the double binding message and how to uncover your sabotage pattern. See you in the show.
Hello, fabulous person. Beate Gillette here, the Growth Architect. Welcome back to the Business Growth Architect Show, where we bring you cutting-edge business strategies from some of the world's most successful entrepreneurs, business transformation experts, and visionaries who want to help you to scale your impact. Look for one tangible strategy that you can take back and implement right away. And now back to our guest. Welcome back. This is Beate Gillette, your host for the Business Growth Architect Show. And today I have to say we are doing something that is on my bucket list. We have David Neagle, who is my brain trainer and my mindset coach, here on the call with us. David, I'm so excited for you to be here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an absolute honor.
Excellent. So for somebody who is maybe not familiar with your work, please tell them who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is David Neagle. I'm the owner and founder of Life Is Now Incorporated. We are a business consulting and mindset company that has been in business for 24 years this month. And we work with businesses all around the world in helping them not only with their mindset, but with the strategies for them to become more successful and then to meet the desires and the goals that they have for their own life and business.
And as I said, I am one of your students, and you had said back when I joined, and that was during the pandemic, you said that you may find that looking back, that this was really a moment in time where a lot of it changed. And I just made a joke, which I'm going to just take in the podcast because it was really funny. I said, you didn't tell me how bruised I was going to end up being in the process.
Yeah, that's a good one. And like I said, I hadn't heard that one before. I've heard things similar, but I haven't heard that one. So that's good.
Yes. And so talk to me a little bit about strategy. So do people commonly assume that stuff around mindset is even a strategy? Share with us.
No.
What is it?
No, they don't. A matter of fact, the idea around mindset, which is really unfortunate, is that it's got more of a definition of being woo-woo, like mystical or that type of an idea. And I understand why. I think because some of it is mixed with a spiritual message in many cases, and even sometimes with a religious message, depending on who's offering the message. I usually like to come from a universal component, but that reason, though, is based on the idea of where do we start with mindset? Where does mindset and the information in the universe actually begin? So that's how I think it kind of got muddled up. But what is really significant about this, and I didn't know this because, I was raised middle class and I was struggling terribly. I was really struggling. Everything was going really bad. And I went bad, my car was repossessed. We went bankrupt. We had to leave our house in the middle of the night and go live in a bad neighborhood because we couldn't afford, anything else. We were on food stamps. It was really bad. And I had an experience. It's a really long story, but I had this experience where I made a couple of changes, 2-3 changes in my mindset, and my income tripled in 30 days. And I was like, wait a minute, this isn't supposed to happen. How is this even possible? So it started me on a path of trying to understand an experience that I had so that I could replicate it, if at all possible. I was like, I don't know what to do. I couldn't figure it out. And I stumble across, I do something just on a chance, right? And I have this magnificent breakthrough, and I didn't understand what happened or why it happened. So then I started down that path trying to figure out what happened. And I spent 7 years studying with some of the most magnificent people on the planet. And when I learned what I had done, I was really astounded to find out that it all started off with mindset, the way that we think, what we believe, what our values are, what they're not. And all of that is shaped by the environment that we're raised in. And we will never really break out of that if we don't learn anything different. We will basically live within the equivalent of what our childhood was if we don't ever learn anything different from a mindset strategy perspective, because that's the thing that leads to accepting other strategies to be able to move out of a situation that might be difficult.
So, what really strikes me about this, David, is that I think that there is a idea that life is happening to me and that I'm going to have to make the best quotation mark out of what the cards I've been dealt with. And oftentimes, I don't know if it is because somebody is either doesn't know or it's too much work. Do you think that there is an awareness that mindset is an actual strategy and that it's a tangible strategy and it's ruled by, you always talk about the laws of the universe? Or do you think that people go and say, well, mindset, that's the meditation part, right? I know I need to have a better spiritual practice.
Yeah.
So do you think that that's the problem and why this is clashing?
I think people don't know. They really don't know. And if they hear it, they associate it with something like you said, like with meditation. So they don't see how it would be applicable to the problem that they're in. And it's a real ignorance issue. I absolutely did not know. But I will tell you this, you did say something that I really agree with. You said something about it being too hard. When I was growing up, when I was a child, if I ever showed interest in anything, I had this very weird feedback that I would get from my parents and my grandparents. And it was all about how it was going to require me to do all these different things in my life that I didn't like to do. And if I was going to pursue that, like I would have to go to school for a long time and study real hard and get really good grades. And I hated school. And I probably hated it because nobody taught me how to be successful in school. And it was a major issue. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, the only way for me to be successful is to do all these different things that I don't like to do, that I can't get myself to do. How the hell am I ever going to be successful? And that was a real significant issue in my mind. And I actually, my breakthrough kind of came when I was like, okay, I'm now responsible. I'm married. I've got 2 kids. I've got responsibilities. I have to break through somewhere and become better so that I can live up to these responsibilities. So if that means that I've got to go back to college to do it, that's what I'll do. But I couldn't even figure out how to do that because I didn't have the time or the money to do it. And that was in the late 80s, right? So I was so stuck in the formulation of success that they gave me, even survival, that it just didn't seem to work. Like everywhere I turned, I ran into a brick wall. I couldn't get out.
Do you think that what happens is that when you are making that commitment to making a change on probably a partially subconscious and a partially conscious level, right? Because the pain now has gotten so big. Do you think that there is a way that our deep desire that you talk about a lot, or God, spirit, universe, that there's somebody with a sign and says, stop, not here, wrong way, wrong way. And now you get really frustrated because you are pushing and you're pushing and you're pushing. And everywhere you go, that you think that there's a dead end. And that leads into one of my next questions. But do you think that as we are breaking through, that we are creating these obstacles, that it is, and you just did a podcast on the meant to be, right? Looking at, is it a sign? So what's happening when I'm willing to change and all this stuff just pops up and it's in my face and I am having this fear pit in my stomach?
So what happens is that you have a value conflict that's actually taking place. And basically what that means is this: you want something over here, but you have a belief system that negates this. And as you start to move in this direction, the competition that happens between your desire of what it is that you want versus the belief that you can't get it, or it's not right to get it, or who do you think you are to get it, that starts to cause problems, which we can also very often actually make determinations like, well, maybe God doesn't want me to do this, or maybe this is a sign that I'm not supposed to do it, because we don't understand why we're getting the resistance that we're getting. And nobody has ever taught us that we're the one that's creating the resistance, and we don't even know how we're creating the resistance. So it becomes a very big block for the average individual.
Yes. I mean, And full transparency, I've been up against this probably for the last 3 to 4 months. I started working with you. I made some major changes, talking about what I wanted, what I didn't want, let things go that I was really attached to, including, I had a great opportunity to do a second gig for the LA Philharmonic, which I like, but it's not aligned anymore with where I want to go.
Okay.
And so I had to say no to that. And that was very, very painful. But it is clear that the direction has been determined. And then it feels like there's this counter force that, and I have nightmares about this. And I wake up, I'm going like, this is so intense. I don't even know where this is coming from, which is why I wanted you on the podcast so bad, because I know a lot of people are going through a lot of stuff right now and they're experiencing this value conflict. But you say, I create this for myself. We create this for ourselves. How do we figure out what it is? Does it matter to figure out what it is,
It does.
or do we give it no value?
No, it does matter, because here's what I do with my clients when they run into this situation. I ask them very directly, what are you currently resisting being, doing, or having? Because there's a principle behind this. And the principle is that there is no confusion or stuckness in the universe. The universe just flows. It always flows toward more life. So if we get stuck, we're resisting something that it's not allowing us to see what is the breakthrough. I have a friend and a person that was a client of mine for a long time. Her name is Darla Ledoux. And she said something to me one day that I was like, not only is that one of the funniest things that I ever heard, but it is extraordinarily accurate. And she was working with a therapist, and she was talking about, she would go from having a little bit of a breakthrough to being stuck. And the therapist said something like this. She was trying to encourage her. She said, when one door closes, another door opens, but the hallways are a bitch. And when she told me that, I just rolled. I thought that was one of the funniest things that I ever heard, and it's also very accurate. When you're in this space where you've decided to walk away from one thing and you're looking for the door to open up, there's usually a certain amount of confusion that is taking place at that time. And if we understand that our subconscious mind is actually looking for a way to have a sense of certainty or safety, we can recognize it, but also understand that we need to break through whatever we are resisting so that we can see what the next door is.
And then, so now that we talked about the value conflict, so, there's a conscious knowledge and a decision that says, I decided to do this. Then there is my fear pattern that comes up that says, whatever, you can't do it, or what are you thinking? Like the classic stuff most people are up against when they make changes. Now I go and I say, okay, I'm going to look into where this is coming from. How do I find out? I mean, is it just about saying what I'm resisting? Is the resistance in, do I step into that? Or is the resistance to say, I got to go back to my mommy and daddy issues on why I wasn't loved?
No, I don't think it's that at all. I think that so here's what happens. If you're having a conversation with somebody and they're telling you that they're stuck, they're not aware of what they're resisting. They're focused on the fact that they're stuck. So if you come in and say, listen, I want you to refocus on something. Here's the suggestion. What is it currently in your life that you're resisting being, doing, or having? It'll instantly change their focus, and they will tell you exactly what they're not doing. It's always there. They're just not looking at it as being part of the problem. It may have a different connotation related to it. It might have to do with money. It might have to do with a person. It could have to do with opportunity, but they're not seeing it as something that needs to be done as a precursor to be able to walk through and have that breakthrough where you have ease of effort type of an idea. But that question really refocuses their mind on what's going on. Now, in defense of what you said, if you say that to the person and then they say, I just can't do that, right? You might have to go into, what those early childhood issues are that are causing them to be afraid of walking through whatever the challenge is, whatever whatever that obstacle is in their life.
I have a great experience share for you, which is something that I actually learned from you. There was a part in our training where you had talked about dragging around that anchor. And then I had this visual of myself being on this sailboat and I was dragging along this anchor. And then, being the good German, I went and got a diving suit and a wetsuit and I learned how to dive. And I looked at that anchor. I took lessons on, how to untie anchors from when they're stuck. And then one day you just said, just cut the darn thing. I'm like, I didn't know I could do that.
Right.
And it was such a profound experience. I have definitely some issues with my mother. And then that changed everything, because then I'm like, I don't need to figure out why the anchor is stuck or have to become an expert on anchor untying and uncovering and recovering. I'm just going to get a new one, or maybe I'm not going to need an anchor at all. But I just cut it and I'm sailing ever after. But that was,
cool.
I keep telling that story because to me, it's so profound. Don't drag your anchor. You can let it go. So the next step now is, now I'm in my hallway, I'm closing one door firmly. I'm stepping into the other door. And now a pattern happens that you call the self-sabotage pattern.
Mm.
So tell our audience, how do I recognize that I'm in a self-sabotage pattern, and what should I do when I see it is happening?
So first of all, a self-sabotage pattern, to sit and consider that you have one, is not anything that you should use as like some kind of self-judgment against yourself. This isn't about judgment. A self-sabotage pattern is basically a self-preservation pattern. It's developed, or the beginnings of it are developed within the first year of our lives. And the reason for it is that the way that our subconscious mind works is it's based on learning pattern recognition from a very early age, because we don't have language or any really way to communicate with mom and dad in order to get our needs met. And in the very smart view of whatever it is that created us as a living being, recognize that if that pattern gets broken between mom and dad, this child dies. Okay, this form of life actually will perish. So those established patterns happen very, very quickly. Okay, now, what does that pattern do? That pattern figures out what works to maintain contact with mom and dad so that we get the needs met, so that we live. And they keep reinforcing themselves all the years that we're going through our childhood. So what ends up happening is that once we start to go out on our own and we begin to start to explore different areas of our life that we're not familiar with, we're stepping into vast amounts of unknown, right? I'm going to try a new job or a business or a new partner or whatever. I'm stepping into the unknown. Your subconscious goes, wait a minute, we don't have a pattern for this. What is this person doing? So what it develops is a different pattern that also develops throughout your childhood, that tries to get you to stop doing something that it doesn't have a pattern, it being your subconscious doesn't have a pattern for the only reason other than it wants to make sure you survive. See, the subconscious mind is only concerned with two things, and that is the survival of the person and procreation to pass the gene pattern down to the next generation. It's not concerned with, are you happy? Are you healthy? Are you having fun in life? It doesn't care about any of that stuff. So it's a survival pattern in the preservation of our life. How do we know that we're going through it? Well, the first thing that happens is that all of a sudden we will become aware. So let me just back up a little bit. We decide that we're going to create a goal. We're going to name a goal. We're going after something that we want. Perfect. We start to walk into the direction of that, or what we think is the direction is, and the subconscious goes on alert. And it's like, this is not familiar. So what it does is it needs to create confusion. I mean, psychologically, we know how this works. It creates confusion to get you to refocus on something that you're already familiar with that's important in order for you to back off where you're going. So how does it do this? It literally starts looking for a problem that's already in your life to exacerbate in some way. This is the craziest thing. When I first learned this, I didn't realize that I was doing it. And then when I realized that I was doing it and how it worked, and I started working with other people, without fail, every person that I've ever worked with personally goes through this if they continue to grow. So I would tell people, here's what's going to happen. You're going to start to grow. Your subconscious mind is going to create some kind of damn problem in your life to get you to take your focus off where you're going and convince you that you've got to solve this problem and you can't focus on the direction that you're going. And I've never seen this not happen, by the way. It's just different degrees of what the problem is. So the first thing is that you start to go in this direction, and then all of a sudden you have problems start to show up in your life, right? Situations, circumstances, this type of thing. It could be interpersonal. It could be you, like a health issue. It could be you have a fight with your spouse or your lover. It could be something happens with your kids. A dog runs away. The electricity gets shut off. Any kind of problem. But what we want to watch out for is that our mind doesn't go into the conviction that I can no longer go after this goal because I must solve this problem. Now, here's the fine line on this. The problem is real. This is not like people are making this up in their mind, right? They're actually creating it subconsciously. They just don't know that they're doing it. So it's real. It is in their reality. It's actually what they're experiencing. So they do need to deal with it from the perspective of responsibility, right? Like, I've got this issue in my life, I have to take care of it. Yeah, absolutely. But you don't have to get emotionally involved in it. And you don't have to let it become a distraction off of the goal that you're going after. When a person understands that this is going to happen regardless of what they do, they can be on the lookout for it so they don't get overwhelmed by the story that they tell themselves when it begins to show up. And the reason for that is that your subconscious mind knows exactly what it's going to take to turn you around. And what happens is it convinces you to move into the agreement of this is more important. So we actually go into this, how do we want to put this? It's like an illusion in our mind where we end up agreeing with the reason that's going to cause us to quit. I've also studied failure as I've studied success. And the interesting thing about failure is that you will never run into somebody and go, you know something, I failed. And the reason that I failed is because I didn't have the ability to break through this, that, or the other. And I accept responsibility and I'm going to live a lesser life because of it. Everybody that fails will tell you the excuse. They will tell you the story. They will tell you the reason that they believe caused their failure, but that's their subconscious mind convincing them that this is an obstacle that they can't get through. Or it tries to rationalize it like, see, I told you success wasn't worth it because you start going after this, now you got problems in your marriage, or you're not focused on your kids. You need to take that time and do this. And other people will get in the story as they see it happening. And of course, everybody's telling you what their own bias or their paradigm is around those ideas. So that's how you recognize it. And what I do with every client before we even start working on whatever we're going to work on, we unravel their sabotage strategy because it'll do something else that's really interesting. It will make an enemy out of anybody that you had brought into your life to support you on your goal, which is fast. I didn't realize it was going to do that. When I first started coaching, I ran into a very interesting problem, not with everybody, but with some people. They were being rock stars. They were going great guns. And then all of a sudden, I would talk to them on the phone one day. They wanted out of coaching. They wanted a refund. They started blaming me. And I'm like, wait, what? What happened? What's going on? And I realized that the subconscious mind tries to close that door so that they can't go back. So it convinces them that anybody that was supporting them is basically the enemy. And if they understand that ahead of time, you can help them, or they can even help themselves recognize when they go into this sabotage process. It won't be comfortable. There's no question about that. But it will allow them to make more educated decisions about how they're going to handle it as they go through it.
Thank you so much for listening to the show. This is Beate, the Growth Architect. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you so much for your time. Have you ever wondered why your business is not growing as quickly as you would like it to be? Well, you may have a business growth blocker. And if you'd like to find out what that business growth blocker is, go and take our brand new quiz at growthblockerquiz.com. And in only a few minutes, you're not just going to find out what that blocker is, but also what to do about it. Again, go to growthblockerquiz.com. And now back to the show. Yeah, there's so much in here that we can unpack and look into. But I think what really sticks out for me is, the reason I wanted to talk to you about this, I think that there is definitely an awareness right now. I mean, if I've ever seen a self-sabotage pattern of the world stepping into effect right now, it is right now.
It's right now. Yeah, I agree with you.
It's just nuts. People are making preemptive decisions to not move forward.
Yes.
And even though there is no actual reason to do so, we are in business consulting, coaching, strategizing. We establish mindset as a part of your strategy. I always say, David, that if I think protecting, that my arms go over something and the energy presses down. If I think growth, my arms go and the energy goes up, because, growth always goes upward. So you make a decision. Protecting goes down. It can't grow. Like literally it can't grow, whereas growth goes up. So with this self-sabotage pattern, right? So now I'm going, oh my gosh, I catch myself. I caused a fight in the relationship yesterday. Maybe that's because I know I can handle things by myself, but I'm going to throw this like lone wolf thing in there. Or, I picked a fight with my sister, my brother, my mom, my dad. How do we stop? Is there an awareness of, do I step back into gratitude? You always say, give things no meaning. It has no meaning other than the one that you give it to. Do you have like a tool? If somebody says, oh, blows my mind, I'm in a self-sabotage pattern, how do I stop it?
Well, first thing is consciousness. To the fact that they can recognize that they're in a self-sabotage pattern is 90% of fixing it, because the only reason it usually works is a person is unaware of what's actually happening. All they're focused on is what's going wrong. So if they have the heightened awareness, as you say, that this is what's happening, and I know why it's happening. The idea would be that I would tell a person not to give the problem any meaning other than what needs to be done to deal with the problem based on how it's affecting your life, which is the responsibility part, right? So I know that I've got this problem. I've got to deal with it from a responsible perspective, but I'm not going to give it meaning. In other words, I'm not going to say, oh, this is going to cause me to failure. Why has this happened to me? Or go into self-pity. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to work through the problem. I'm also going to control that problem in a big way. Like I'm going to determine when I work on it. It's not going to control my life. Okay. I will put what I need to do around it in the calendar. I will look to delegate the best that I can, if I can do that, to get somebody else to help me with those issues. But I'm not going to get emotionally involved to the degree that it starts controlling me. I think that's really the big separation that we want to communicate for those folks, is don't get emotionally involved in it. Don't create a dramatic story around it, even if it's a really traumatizing issue. It could very well be, right? So I could see how it's easy for a person to step into that. But that's the only part about anything that they can control, how they react to this problem that's showing up in their life. And like you said, you're experiencing this more and more. For multiple generations now, like 2-3 generations, we have not seen this much uncertainty in our world ever. Like if you went back far enough, you could, but not anything that any of us or our parents or our grandparents even experienced this much uncertainty in the world. So when there's that much uncertainty, you have to get people to focus on the things that they can create in their life, that they can be certain about, which is always something that they feel that they're in control of.
Yeah, I think that this is really a moment where there's so much uncertainty and people are so afraid. This is the time to lead, I think. And this is the time to take the certainty approach, because I think for especially the coaches, consultants that are listening, that if you are experiencing clients or prospects going like all kind of wacko on you, I think you need to double down on the certainty and say, this is what needs to be done in a situation like this to rebuild trust and safety. I think to me, those are the
Right.
really two big words that I'm seeing right now. What would you say to our listeners that are going like, wow, this, I'm finding myself in these patterns? Is there a particular message that we can give them to say, you got
Yeah.
this? It's not always going to be like that. What is it going to be, David?
So history shows that the people that progressively work on creating their life the best that they can during uncertain times come out on the other end the best. It's the ones that don't do anything, or they try to hide their head, or they let their fear lead them, that get completely destroyed during these times, because the times that we're living in affect us emotionally, financially. They're affecting us based on where we're in the world. I've got clients all over the world that are experiencing various different changes that are happening. They have to get very much in control of the direction that they're going, because that allows them to learn how to overcome all the different challenges that happen, and they can make conscious decisions. They're not overtaken by the fear. If they start to let their mind get overtaken by the uncertainty, that will compound on them, and they will, it goes into learned helplessness is what happens. And then they're just totally frozen. I mean, there's people right now, famous people, I'm not going to say who they are, but there's famous people that are stuck in their basement because they're afraid to come out because of the pandemic. They're not convinced in their mind that it's safe to go out in the world. And I'm talking about famous, successful people being completely stuck because this completely hijacked their conscious thinking, and they don't know how to think accurately to get out from under it.
So what I'm hearing you say, and I've been around you long enough that I dare to say that your preferred method to combat anything is take action.
Yes. Yes.
Take
controlled action, right? I mean, obviously, if it's like, wait to do this for a little while, whatever, but it's about directing your life forward, not having it be directed for you by somebody else.
Yes, and that's really, I think, a great message for us to leave our audience with, because again, the value conflict, the double binding message, when you are unclear within yourself because you want something else and something else is pulling you back, not giving things more meaning than they have to. It just is.
That's
It's
right.
not good or bad, right? I think you talk about this. So I'm going to keep you just for one more minute and help us understand the judgment. So why do I want to judge an experience as good or bad?
The reason that we do it is because we were taught that it'll keep us safe.
Okay.
And the damnedest thing about it is that at one time, that was really true. Now we're kind of moving back into a time that's like that again, because we've got a very significant cancel culture that we're dealing with. But if people would really understand that cancel culture only works if you believe it, right? If a group of people get together and try to cancel you, it only works if you feel that you've been canceled. It can't work if you're like, oh, puff off, like you're not going to cancel me, you go away. You have to believe it in order for it to work. But in our history, there were times when dictators ruled every place on earth. And if you stepped outside of the narrative, you could be tortured or put to death. So really coming up with correct judgments was very, very important. It could save your life or it could cost you your life. But for most places, we've moved out of those times, but the tradition of the judgment's been passed down. So it's passed down from mom or dad or whatever, and they become crazy ideas that no longer exist in the time frame that we're living in. So the idea is to understand this. Every single thing can only affect you based on the story that you give it. Nothing has any meaning other than the story that we give it. We determine whether it's good or bad. We determine how we experience it. People did not come here and get a handbook when they got on Earth that said, here's what everything means. They developed meanings about things. And if you have a history, a family that gave you meanings about things that are not true, or they're hurtful, or more in line with self-sabotage, you've got to put that down and really start to think for yourself about what do you want something to mean, because nothing has an absolute meaning of its own.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. And From personal experience, I think this is the daily ministry. While listening, I can't even tell you how many days I've listened to podcasts of yours and over again. Sometimes, I use your method of just taking a book and putting my finger down on a page to see
Yeah.
what I need to be hearing at that moment. I hear that you also are giving us a message of grace with ourselves,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
to
For
not be
sure.
so judgmental, and to, you don't always get it right on the first time. Sometimes it is a process. Even when you do then all the right things and the mindset and you get into the habit, it does take a little bit of time to turn a ship, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And the real truth is we only learn by making mistakes and then learning from those mistakes. We don't learn by trying to make everything perfect.
What? I think that is probably the biggest nugget that we can drop sort of at the end of this interview, is to say that if you think that this is about perfection, and then when you figured it out from here on out, after you've done, the work and the development, that you're now never going to make another mistake and everything's going to be magically falling into place, not happening.
Not happening.
Not
Perfection is not a destination, and neither is success, right? In our minds, somehow it got twisted that if we could just be perfect, or we could just get it right, or if we could just be a success, we'll be safe. And that place does not exist. It's a fantasy. It's a fairy tale. It doesn't exist. The only way that we stay certain or safe is by allowing ourselves to make mistakes, understanding what caused the mistake, learning from it, and then making new choices. That allows us to move forward. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're a human being. That's how all things work in life, by understanding from the mistakes so that we can make different decisions, because that's our greatest power, our ability to choose.
I love that. And that's a great way for us to end this interview. So, David, how can we find out more about you? Tell us about your programs and where we can get good free stuff, how we can learn more about you.
The best place to go is the Successful Mind podcast. And you could look it up. It's on all the podcast channels. We're ranked highest in the business podcast channels, but it's the Successful Mind podcast. And that is all free teaching. Like, we're not asking anything from anybody there. We give our best content. If you want to know more about the company and how you could be involved, it's davidneagle.com. And then you can go there and find that out. But those are the two best places.
Excellent. Well, so thank you so much for being on the Business Growth Architect show. This has been such a pleasure for me. And thanks to all of our listeners. You are amazing. We are so grateful for you to be here. And if you want to know what your number one business growth blocker is, go take the quiz at growthblockerquiz.com and stay tuned for more episodes with awesome guests. Thank you so much, and goodbye. And that's it for us today. Thank you for listening and watching the Business Growth Architect show. I enjoyed having you here. And for accountability, just take one of the strategies that you have heard, one thing that you can implement in your business immediately. Please leave comments. Don't forget to like and share this show. And if you have any questions about business, please put them in the comments. We are here for you. We're here to support you and help you to grow, build, and scale your own business. For more advice, please check out our website in the show notes below. Thank you again. This is Beate Gillette, the Growth Architect, and goodbye.